Hey there, so my name is Cody, and I want to start off by telling you that every 20 minutes there's a person in the United States that gets domestically assaulted. Now, I am a survivor. I am a survivor of addiction. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I'm also a survivor of attempted murder. For the last year and a half, I had been in a very abusive, toxic relationship. And I wanted to start this podcast and maybe a series on domestic violence to bring awareness. I feel like if we go through things in life, and especially very traumatic things, if we share them and they help somebody else, then in my eyes it was worth me going through it. I'm not really worried about how many people view this or if it blows up. What I'm worried about, that it saves somebody else's life, because I know when I was going through this domestic assault, the hardest thing for me to do was find my self-worth and walk away. Unfortunately, I waited to the point to where it was, until it about cost me my life. I was stabbed 27 times and left on a 1% chance to live. That doesn't have to be you. That doesn't have to be your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your friend. So if you have someone going through something like that, a domestic abusive relationship or partnership or friendship, show them this video, because they don't have to wait until it gets to the point of almost killing them to walk away. I have lots of connections. I have lots of support groups. I know lots of people that can help. And I myself will help in any way that I can. So my story is kind of graphic. I want to go ahead and say that. And I want to keep this as raw as possible. I don't want to do a bunch of editing to it. I don't want to have to do a lot of that. So I want to kind of just speak freely, because I feel like I relate more when I can tell that something's like raw. It's not been edited a bunch of times. So for me, I want to try to do that. September the 23rd, 2023 is when my life changed forever. That's when I was attacked by my abuser and almost killed. But I don't want to start with that day. I want to start with September the 22nd, 2023. And I want to start there because I feel like that day speaks volumes. And it helps my viewers understand a little better. So, September the 22nd, 2023, my significant other and I, we were married. We were living apart, and he had reached out to me and said that he wanted to stay the night with me. And I said, okay, well, pick me up after work, and I feel like that's fine. And I was staying at a family friend's house that night. And I messaged her and asked her, and she said it was okay. So he said, all right. Well, that night came. I finished my shift at work. I was a server and in college at the time. And my husband came and picked me up, and my brother had worked with me at the time, and he asked if we could give him a ride to work or ride back home from work as well, and I said absolutely. So my significant other and I, we were waiting on my brother to get off, and we were sitting out in the parking lot. My brother gets off, we take him to my grandmother's where I was staying at the time, and we drop him off, and we head to my family friend's house where we were going to stay the night. And at this time, David and I were staying apart because things were getting heavy with the abuse, and he was in active addiction, and he was using pretty heavily at this time, and I was sober, and it was hard for me to be around him because I couldn't let my guard down, because I was always in fight, flight, or freeze, and always in survival mode. So with that being said, that's why David and I were staying apart at the time. We start going to my family friend's house, which was 5 minutes away from my grandmother's, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, give or take. And we're about 2 minutes into the drive, and David looks at me and he says, I got to get help. And I said, what do you mean? And I kind of figured he was talking about the addiction. And he said, if I don't get help, I'm going to end up hurting you, like killing you. And I was like, what? And before I could even finish what, David had his hands around my throat while we were going down the road, trying to choke me out. I'm instantly in fight, flight, or freeze. I was already on high alert because I didn't know if David was using or not at this time. I hadn't looked at his eyes since he had picked me up for work. It was dark, couldn't really see in the car. And that's always how I was conditioned to be, was look at David's eyes. And if David's not home, then it's probably going to be a bad night. So I was already on high alert, being very vigilant, I should say. And so I pulled the car into park and pulled the emergency brake, and the car is not stopping, but I opened the car door because I was going to jump out going down the road. And we're in my hometown at this time where I grew up, and back in my active addiction, I used to get in trouble some there, so the officers and stuff knew us. Well, a cop pulls up behind us. We stopped the car. David said, I'm going to tell them what I did. And I said, you're going to go to jail if you do that. They're going to arrest you. I was trying to protect David from ever getting a record, or I'd never pressed charges on him for that reason, because I've been through the system. It's really hard to get out of. It's not easy. So I didn't want David to have to go through that. So the cops come up to the window. There's one on each side. They're asked what's going on. And I say, well, I thought the brakes were going out. So I was going to jump out because I got scared and I thought we were going to wreck. And I pulled the emergency brake. And the officer calls another officer, there. And the officer on my side looks at me and he says, by name, Cody, what is going on? And I said, well, I thought the brakes were going out. So I was going to jump out. And he said, you were going to jump out of a moving car because you thought the brakes were going out. And I said, yes, I was scared we would wreck. And I would rather hit the pavement than wreck. And he said, at this point, they had David pulled out of the car and back at the officer's car talking to him. And the officer at my window said, Cody, is he abusing you? And I said, no. And he was looking in my eyes and he said, what are you on? And I said, nothing. And he said, then why are your eyes so big? And I said, because I'm scared. And he said, if he's not hurting you, then why are you scared? I said, I told you because I thought that the brakes were going out. So this officer says, he said, you're sure he's not abusing you? And I said, yes. He said, okay. He said, Cody, you are absolutely in a panic. And I said, yes. And he said, I find it hard to believe that y'all were going 30 miles an hour, maybe 25 miles an hour, and you were so scared that you're going to wreck, that you were going to jump out of the car. He said, is he hurting you? And I said, no. And he said, okay. He said, well, I'm not letting you leave with him. I want you to call someone to come get you so that I can make sure you're safe. So at this point, clearly the officers knew that something else was wrong, but I wasn't going to say anything because they know our family. They know where I come from. They know that I grew up in a very dysfunctional family where there was a lot of fighting and arguing, and my dad was really heavily on drugs, bless his heart, and so they knew I wasn't going to open my mouth about it. So with that being said, I call my family friends that I was going to go to, that we were going to, and she has her grandson come pick me up. David follows me and his grandson back to my family friend's house, and we stayed there for a few. I figured David would just go home. I figured he would just go back to his mom's, and because clearly it wasn't gonna fly. I wasn't doing this. See, I never used to run or do anything like that. When David would hit me, I would always freeze. And then it turned to flight. real quick. When things started getting real abusive with David and I, and he was really hurting me and doing extremely outlandish things, I got to the point to where I was running. And I knew that's when things were serious, and that's what kind of made me start pulling away. And I didn't want to divorce David at the time. I didn't want to do anything like that because I was still in love with him, and I just wanted him to get better, and I thought that we could savor this relationship, this marriage. So I was inside, and I was in the living room of our family's friend's house, and we were talking, and David was outside on the phone. He comes back in, and he's trying to get me to go to the gas station with him. And I put it off as much as I could, made excuses for a moment, said, I'm talking, maybe you can go ahead and go. And he just wasn't having it. So I finally, after about an hour, I said, okay, I'll go with you. So I went to the gas station with David, and on the way back, he tries to pull over because he needs to get in the trunk and show me something. And I said, well, you can do it at our family friend's house. It's right here. It's right down the road. And he just refused to listen. So he pulls over at this other little gas station, and he gets out of the car and gets back in the car, and he has this window thing that you bust the window out with, or, the tool that you can cut your seatbelt with if you get in a wreck. And he says, I've hurt you so much that I don't think I can ever live with myself, and I don't think there's any way I could heal it except if I hurt myself in front of you so that you see I'm in pain too. And I scream and I said, David, no. And I snatched the tool from him, and he's driving down the road and he starts crying. And I said, just take me back to my family friends. It's all okay. We'll be fine. Because at this point, see, I have had to bring David down to a level of sanity multiple times. And my always, my first step is to get where there's people, because I need to know that I'm safe. Point blank, period. And so I kept saying that, and he drove past my family friend's driveway, and I said, David, take me back or I'm going to jump out of the car again. And he slams on the brakes, whips a U-turn, and says, okay, whatever, takes me back to our family friend's house, and I go inside. Because at this point I see there's no de-escalating this, and I have no control. I can't do anything, and I'm not going to be alone with him. I always made the mistake of getting in the car with David. He was very good at manipulating me to make me think everything was okay, and then we would get in the car and he would act a complete fool and try to wreck or bash my head in the window or something insane, So I see at this point there's no de-escalating it. I get back to our family friends, and I get out of the car immediately, and I go inside. David stays in the car. I leave him out there because at this point I'm done. I'm completely fed up. I'm tired. I can't handle it anymore. So I go inside, and I'm standing in the guest bedroom where we were going to be sleeping that night, and I hear my family friend say, Cody, come here. And I've known this woman for a very, very, very long time, most of my life, honestly. And when she has this tone in her voice, I know that it's serious, and I better listen. So I go into the living room, and David is sitting on the couch with my family friend, who she doesn't really know. She doesn't really know David. I think maybe they'd met once, maybe not at this point. But we get in the living room, and she looks at me and she says, I want you to listen to him. I don't want you to say anything, don't speak, just listen. And I said, okay. So I'm sitting there, and David goes through this spiel about how he's really struggling. He doesn't want to live. He needs to get help. He needs to go to a crisis center unit, and that he was on the phone with CSU, and they would take him if I took him that night. And I looked at Terry and I said, I will not take him by myself, point blank, period. I'm not getting back in the car with him by myself. Remind you, my family friend doesn't know what had just happened a few hours before this with the cops and everything, because when she sent her grandson to get me, I asked him not to say anything to her about what happened. I did tell him, but I asked him not to speak to her about it, but at least I thought she didn't know. I think he ended up telling her, but she said, I will make you a deal. If I go with you, we can take my car and we can take him up there tonight, and you can leave y'all's car here, and then you can come back with me. And I said, okay, that's the only way I'll go. So we get in the car and we take David to CSU, and I had spoke a little bit to my family friend about things that were going on in my relationship and in the past, and she knew how I grew up, so she knew I was very fragile. She knew that she could tell things were off with me and a little different, so she knew right away that David would sit up front and she would sit in the back, and she had her taser in case if he was to do anything crazy or try to hurt me. And so we take him to the CSU unit, and we get out, and I said, David, if you have anything on you, you need to get rid of it, because they're going to search your bags and stuff when you go in here, and you don't want to get in trouble. I said, and you want to start fresh. You really got to do this if you're going to do it. And David said, are you going to wait for me? And I said, absolutely. I'll be with you through the whole thing. You can call me through this. Whatever we need to do, I'll bring you some clothes up here, whatever we got to do. And I would have if he was getting help. If David was getting help, I would have stuck by him for the rest of his life. Sober David was my best friend. So after we have a little intimate moment, we cry. I try to give him some pep talk and, encouraging, a little encouragement, and I'll take him in and we check him in. They do a breathalyzer, they do a drug screen, they do all this stuff, and then he checks in and we say our goodbyes. Now, I get back in the car, and my family friend and I were talking on the way back, and she said, you got to give him at least a shot, let him get some help, and if he doesn't change, then walk away. But let this be the last time, because she knows that I'm very forgiving. She knows that I stay and I make excuses and I enable, and I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm not a violent physical person. I grew up in it, and for me, that's just an absolute no-go. That's not what you do. That's not how you handle situations. And so I was willing to give it the last chance. That's what I was willing to do, and this was the last chance for me. That's what I told myself. We go back to my family friends, and I'm laying in bed, and and I think that everything's okay, and I feel like it's good. Now, I'm not going to go any further, because the next day is, like I said, that's when the story turns. But I do want to touch on a couple things here. There was a point in this relationship when I told David that I thought I was built for this. I wanted to walk away so bad, but mentally I wanted to walk away. Emotionally, I was still so attached. It was a trauma bond. And there was times that David even told me he couldn't make a promise that he wouldn't put his hands on me again, and I still stayed, which was me enabling him, showing him that he could treat me however he wanted, and I wouldn't walk away. I want to say something. I had told him one day I felt like I was built for this because I grew up in the drugs and the fighting and the chaos and the craziness, and I thought that God had built me for this marriage, and we could see it through and we could make it out on the other side. When I say that out loud today to myself or to anybody, I feel absolutely insane, because nobody should ever go through something like that. I'll tell you this right now. It's not a game, and the statistics are so high for this that every 20 seconds someone gets domestically assaulted. Or I think it was 20 minutes, yeah. That's 10 million people a year that get domestically assaulted. When are we going to break the cycle? When are we going to start standing up? I feel like this is something that will always go on, but I feel like if there's groups and more ways or if we could find a better way to help these people that are the abusers, and then also help the domestic violence victims, then we could bring that number down tremendously. We really could. Humans are built to adapt, and humans are also built to find out or to come up with ways to survive and make the world a better place. We just have to have a little bit of encouragement to do it. And I know that's the last thing I wanted to hear when I was going through a lot of the violence and a lot of the fighting and arguing. And it got to the point with us where David would just fly mad and hit me for no reason. he would just be extremely high and be having bad thoughts in his head, and he would call them the delusions. I'm believing the delusions, he would say. And as soon as he said that, I would know that he was about to get very violent with me. And before I could ever make a move, he would hit me or smack me or punch me in the face and humiliate me. He would always humiliate me during it. Call me names and put me down. And see, what really threw me off with this situation of mine is that David was never very controlling about who I hung out with or who I saw, or he didn't really talk crap about my friends or control me with money, nothing like that, ever. He never did that. He was only physically violent and verbally abusive. So I am so excited to release my story, and the best thing about this is I'm still going through the trials. I just started this court case with David. The state picked up the charges, so they asked me to go to court and testify, and I did. Because the next person may not make it. I had 1% chance. 1% chance to live. They were telling my family, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. There's a 1% chance. I feel like God brought me through this to spread the message and help someone else, and I will do it. I was brought up in the whole don't snitch, you don't testify, you don't do this, you don't do that, the whole drug culture. But to me, a human life is worth more when it comes to domestic violence. I'm not in the drug game anymore. I don't play that game. It's not cute anymore. It's not something I feel like I've outgrown it. I feel like I've worked really hard to be a better person and to be sober, and that's what I'll continue to do. But I promise you, I will help every single domestic violence victim that I can with my story. I will shout it from the rooftops if that's what it takes. And if me testifying to put him behind bars till he can get the help that he needs, or the sanity or the sobriety that he needs, because see, David could never make it past 2 or 3 or 4 months of sobriety, or 5 months. He would never make it to a year. He would always relapse. And if this gives him 35 years of recovery, then I feel like it's worth it. And if it saves lives, then I did a hell of a job doing this. Call me what you want, but you weren't laying there in an induced coma on life support with a 1% chance to live, and your family surrounding you with tears in their eyes because they thought it would be the last time they ever got to speak to you or see you. They told me they didn't know if I was going to have brain damage. They didn't know if I'd ever be able to walk. They didn't know if I'd be able to talk right. They didn't know if I'd be able to remember things. I was out of that hospital in 9 days. The next person may not be so lucky. So if you or somebody you know is going through domestic violence, please show them this video and let me tell them my story. You can give them my number if you know me personally. And if you don't, reach out to me and I'll give it to you. Because it's not a game. I'm so excited to be able to share my story with you guys and take you through the court with me. I do plan on interviewing the DAs and the detectives and the surgeons who saved my life and who continue to fight for me today. Literally fight for me and check on me and make sure that I'm okay. So stay tuned and bear with me through this. I'm so excited. I'm even thinking about doing a little Murder Mystery Monday where we find a case that is actively going on or that has happened that's domestic violence or something like that, and that I can discuss with my fans and friends and family. I also plan on having friends and family and loved ones come on and tell their story, because I think the most empowering thing that a person can do is tell you their story. And it make a difference because everybody's story is different. And imagine if we all came together and told our stories, how many lives we could really save through this. My story has addiction, it has sexual assault, domestic assault, attempted murder, it has depression, anxiety, PTSD. I am made up of so much, and I have so much I want to share and tell. So with that being said, I plan on doing a video every week and a podcast with that as well. I may keep them short for, like, right now I think we've hit like 30 minutes, so I may keep these kind of short in the beginning, and then on the interviews do like an hour so that it's worth more and you get more out of it. I'm very ADHD, so it's hard for me to stick through really long podcasts, so that's why I was thinking I may just do like the 30-minute or something like that. I'm so excited to be able to release this, and it's raw. That's what makes me happy about this, is it's raw. I'm not editing all this. I'm literally just your average Joe sitting in my living room telling you my story, hoping that it'll save your life or someone near to you. If you know somebody that's struggling or going through something like this, and you can give them my contact, you can give them my number, my Facebook, whatever you would like to give them, and I will gladly talk to them. I also know a lot of support groups and the, things like that could help people. A lot of therapists, I know a lot of psychiatrists, a lot of therapies that are working that I'm doing right now that have been that have helped tremendously for me, and I would love to share those with you guys. If you have any questions or comments or anything that I can do for you, please just leave a comment or private message me. I can't wait to release this. I was supposed to release it a couple days ago, but I had to edit something in this particularly. I had to be able to say this was graphic and stuff, and I forgot to do that. So I'm a couple days late, but to me, it's just getting it out there. I just wanted to get it out there as quick as possible and start this movement. And if you can think of a good name for this movement, let me know. I think we should start a little movement and have a little support group, or we could even do a virtual support group. We could meet on one day a week or something and discuss our stories and swap stories and share, and things that we could all share things that have helped us, and therapies or advice, anything like that. I am on a very big spiritual journey right now, and I can tell that something is changing in my life, not because of what happened to me, but because I'm losing interest in sitting around watching TV. I'm losing interest in all these pointless things to me. I've been eager to learn and educate, and I'm actually listening to myself. I've had to really slow down. I am currently still in school. I am changing my major. So I do have a lot of things keeping me busy. I work as well, but I'm really trying to make a change, even if it's only one person at a time. That's enough, and I really debated on telling my story or what I should do, if I should just go on about my life, but like I have said, I do believe in a higher power, and I believe he brought me through this to share my story and save someone else's life, and that's what I'm going to do. I have no other choice. And you guys are going to get to come along with me through the trials and stuff like that. I'm so excited. So what happened to me is on video, and I've not seen the video yet, but I will go ahead and give you a little bit of information in the case, which I've been told I could. We had a preliminary hearing like a couple weeks ago, and they were going to show the video in court, but they didn't have to. The judge said, I don't need to see that to see that this gentleman's he was almost killed. And he said, I have no problem bounding this over to the grand jury. So we had the preliminary hearing because the preliminary hearing was used to see if there was enough evidence to bound this over to the grand jury, because they are charging him with a felony first-degree attempted murder and domestic assault with a deadly weapon. The charge has been changed to premeditated first-degree attempted murder. And so since it's a felony, it has to be held with a grand jury, I guess. So or as to be in like criminal court. So that's why we had to have the preliminary hearing to make sure that they had enough evidence, which it was on video. So they definitely have enough evidence. It was with video and sound, or picture and sound. So, you know, I really can't wait. I think this is going to be so good for me during all this too, because I don't have to keep all this in. I'm able to do my therapy, also share and help someone else, and that's how you heal. That's how we heal. I feel like as humans, we have to be able to share our story and build each other up, and also give someone else the strength, because we've walked those same shoes. To be able to stand up and say, I'm worth more, and I'm going to walk away before it gets to the point of almost death. I had to make the hardest decisions I've ever had to make this past year. And I'll tell you, the only thing that helped me through making these decisions was my family, and the thought of being able to help someone else that I know is going through this, you know. I've fought a lot of battles in my life, but this was the hardest one I ever had to fight, because standing here today, I would be a liar if I said I didn't still have love for my husband, if I didn't have care for him. Because unfortunately, when this happened to me, it didn't take all those feelings away, and I think that's the hardest part. Is we can't understand why our abusers are hurting us so bad, and we can still love them so much. Why can't we love us more to walk away? You know, I've had to learn that, and it's coming slowly. So until the next episode, which I'm hoping, since I released this one today on Monday, I will probably release my second episode next Monday, and I'm so excited. And so, yeah, give me your feedback. Tell me what you think. And let's do some critiquing, and let's change the world, guys. Okay, let's save some lives. Thank you so much. Have a great night.